Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay Adler, and today I'm going to share 3 tips for freezing motion in the studio. Now, did you know that a flash doesn't automatically freeze your subject perfectly still? That's what I used to think. I'm going to explain why and how you can counter this. Plus, we're going to take what we learn and put it into practice photographing a beautiful model. Let's take a look. When you're shooting outdoors, we all know that a faster shutter speed helps to freeze your action so that your subject and their movement are both tack sharp. But when we move into the studio, things change a bit. We're no longer using our shutter speed to freeze motion, and instead, we need to be introduced to something called flash duration. I used to believe that if you add a flash into the equation, your subject is automatically frozen in place, but that's actually not really true. When a strobe fires, it isn't a consistent flash of light every time. Each flash is on for a specific length or duration of time. When a flash is on for a longer period of time, this gives you more output, actually makes the light brighter, but it can cause your subject and motion to blur. Normally, if a subject is just moving, it's not going to be enough to cause blur, but if you're photographing a dancer or water or some other fast-moving subject, then flash duration matters. When freezing motion in the studio, think of flash duration kind of like your shutter speed is acting outdoors. The faster the flash duration, the more it freezes motion. Now, there's actually quite a few numbers and a lot of different charts and things we could study to learn about flash duration, but in this video, I just want to focus on the practicality of it. So the question we're going to answer is this: how can we freeze action in the studio? Here are 3 essential tips. When you're shooting in the studio, you want to avoid too much ambient or constant light around you in the space. When the ambient light is too strong, you're going to get ghosting or motion blur because that constant light is going to be registering in your frame. Turn off the lights, close the curtains, maybe even turn down the power of your modeling lights because sometimes they actually affect your results. You're also going to want to shoot at or near your camera's sync speed. For me, that's 1/200th of a second because this helps reduce the impact of ambient light. Now, if you want to see if the room is dark enough, set your camera to the correct exposure, then turn or take off your trigger. When you take a photo, if you still see your subject or the environment, the ambient light is too bright. The frame should be completely black. Flash duration is tied to flash power. So if you have the power of your light turned up really high, the flash is going to be on longer to give you enough light. I'm using the Sekonic L858DU flash meter. So this reads flash exposure and flash duration. Now, I'm not going to get into all these different measurements and numbers, but for this demo, I'm going to be using something called the T.1. It's a measuring system that basically tells me how long the light is on when it's above 10% of its brightness. Don't worry about this. It's basically just 1 or 2 ways you can measure flash duration. So I'm going to start off with my strobe at a power of 9 out of 10. This is really bright. And I take a reading and I have 1/964th of a T.1 reading. Basically, as a flash duration goes, it's not very fast. If you're aiming for a short, fast flash duration, you're going to want to lower the power of your strobe. It makes the flash duration faster. But when you lower the power of the strobe, you probably have to bring your light source in closer or use a wider aperture or a faster ISO. You have to compensate for turning down the power of the light. So I'm going to decrease the power of my strobe 5 stops. And then I'm going to bump up my ISO. The exposure is going to remain the same, but now that flash duration is 1/3200th of a second, significantly faster. Some newer strobes offer the ability to freeze motion through a mode that prioritizes a faster flash duration. And this doesn't mean you have to buy the most expensive strobe out there. They actually exist at all different price ranges. Here I'm going to be using my ProPhoto D2, and when I switch over to the freeze mode, I drastically shorten my flash duration. So let's put the flash at a power of 7, and my flash duration is 1/1700th of a second. And now I switch to freeze mode without making any changes to the flash power. The change in the flash duration when I take another reading is now twice as fast. Now, let's combine everything we've talked about. I'm going to turn my freeze mode on. I'm going to turn the power down to 4. And now the flash duration is 1/8500th of a second with that T.1 reading. So let's bring in the model. And for this setup, I'm going to include 3 lights. Main light is a beauty dish with a power of f9. Second light, my fill light, is a zoom reflector with a blue gel, f6.3. And lastly, barn doors as a rim light, f11, and this helps give definition of backlight so the water has more glow and separation. And all of these had a flash duration of around 1/8700th of a second. And then it's time for the real magic. It's the tossing of the water, the model's pose, the model's expression. That's where the photo is made. During this shoot, I used my Sekonic L858DU meter to verify that I was working with flash durations fast enough to perfectly freeze the water in my scene. Remember that for most subjects, the strobe's flash is going to be more than fast enough to freeze your subject in place. But for instances like this, where we have a lot of movement or water, don't forget to reduce your ambient light, turn down the power of your strobe, and try a strobe with a freeze mode option.